Are you ready to listen to your soul? Discover the power of pausing and turning in on Our Soul Whisper with Kathy Belmont and Dr. Pat. This sacred show offers a safe space for self-discovery, healing, and soulful transformation. Let your inner voice rise, be heard, and gently guided into expression. Tune in every first and third Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. Subscribe now so you never miss the whisper meant just for you. Visit OurSoulWhisper.com.
What if your training isn't enough? The Multicultural Mindset Podcast invites counselors and therapists to unlearn the one-size-fits-all approach. This isn't cultural competence. It's a way of being that brings racialized experiences from the margins to the very center of care. Let's stop pathologizing Black pain and start challenging the system that created the bias in the first place. Visit newseasons.training to subscribe.
What if one decision could change everything? Cherise Evans.
Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal. How to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you'll learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
And welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline.
Over the past several months, we've had numerous conversations with clients, friends, and family that have had a common theme. An expression of the horrid state of the world we live in, and in many cases, the loss of hope for a better future. Everywhere they look and in everything they read, they see anger, hate, fear, division, and apathy. And we understand their outlook, we really do, but we don't share it. In fact, we think we're on the verge of entering the new world. So how does this relate to a shift in consciousness and spiritual teachings? What do we mean by old world and new world? What has changed, and why do we think this shift is accelerating? And where do we individually hold power in this dynamic? All this and more in the next hour. And for live viewers, we're taking questions in the second half of the show. So throw your questions in the chat or call in at 1-800-930-2819. And I thought I'd kick the show off today by actually reading this blog piece I wrote for my website, thewayhealing.com, which has really got us thinking that this is a good topic for the show. So here I go. A shift in consciousness. And the title of it's called The Good News, The New World, if you're looking on the website. A shift in consciousness. All spiritual teachings and spiritual systems are just that, spiritual. I think the name spiritual is meant to directly communicate this concept without any confusion. This idea is not meant to be some profound secret that would one day be uncovered by advanced science. No, spiritual teachings were never meant to be applied to the material world. Yet this is what has happened for thousands of years. For thousands of years, we collectively could not seem to understand what the wise men, sages, and enlightened masters were trying to tell us. Or more likely, it was too easy to obscure their message. But I believe that the shift in consciousness they were guiding us towards is happening now in real time. Our collective consciousness is shifting rapidly to a higher state and ushering in a collapse of the old world to make way for the new world. This is why it may appear so dark right now, because it's always darkest before the dawn. The collapse of the old world and the revolution will not be televised. The old world is a state of consciousness that is rooted in materialism. Desire, pride, righteousness, anger, judgment, guilt, and fear are the driving forces in this material world. It is a world of self-will, selfishness, war, force, and violence. The fact that we've entered a phase of hyper-materialism, including an attempt at transhumanism, is also a strong sign that we're at the end of days. In the old world, the ego identity is the idol of worship, and it is defined by power and success. All actions are driven by anything to protect the ego. Lies, propaganda, and manipulation are used to shape our subjective realities. Now the transition to the new world, and what a time to be alive. The new world is a state of consciousness that is rooted in spiritual truth. courage, willingness, neutrality, acceptance, love, joy, and peace are the driving forces in the spiritual world. It is the world in which the truth has set us free, and rigorous honesty becomes the never-ending gateway to freedom. And it is interesting that it was the 12-step folks that figured out that rigorous honesty was the pathway to God consciousness. And it is no wonder Jesus surrounded himself with repentant sinners. The answer has always been right in front of us. In the new world, the lies of the old divide and conquer system are exposed. The temple is destroyed, if you will. And what replaces it is the unity of consciousness and the understanding that forgiveness and nonviolence is the only way to peace. The medium of change. The message is now much harder to be dimmed, and the truth is much harder to hide. Technology has unwittingly turbocharged the shift in consciousness, and it is happening with greater frequency, both individually and collectively. For me and many others that have gone through an individual experience, God clapped and destroyed the character or false idol that I built up, thus allowing me the opportunity to shift my consciousness and see things with a new perspective. And just like myself, millions of others are communicating these experiences and shifts in consciousness via global communication networks. And collectively, the lies of the old system can no longer be maintained. The dam is already broken with massive disclosures of previously hidden or classified information. And the decentralization of information through technology platforms. The attempts to censor and ban this information has failed, and the truth is coming, and with it, the new world. You choose your ending. But my conjecture doesn't really matter, does it? What matters is that you have the power to enter the new world anytime you want. You have always had it. You choose it every day. You choose the consciousness by which you engage the world. Is it fear, anger, desire, and pride? Or would you choose courage, acceptance, peace, and love? Ultimately, your choice is the only thing that matters. It is your subjective reality that shapes the world. Free yourself by having the courage to face your fears. Free yourself by having the willingness to face yourself and your own denial. Choose rigorous honesty, unconditional love, and unconditional forgiveness in the face of everything, and you will reside in the new world. That, my friends, is the good news.
Thank you. And I'm happy you read that to our viewers. It was interesting as we were talking about this podcast. We were coming up with all kinds of ideas, and it almost seemed ridiculous to talk about anything other than this, because this seems to be so much of what's encompassing our lives, both personally and professionally. And I had a question for you, but I think I'm going to start with where you ended, actually, instead, which is, you said what matters is that you have the power to enter the new world anytime you want. It's a choice.
It's a choice.
So I understand that both intellectually and in an embodied way. But I think that even a couple of years ago, that statement would have sounded really odd to me. Mm-hmm. You have a choice. Do you want to be in the old world or you want to be in the new world? What does that choice actually involve? Because it's not just waking up one day and saying, I don't choose fear. Nobody really chooses fear. We don't know that we're choosing fear. Our operating systems might be working through fear, but nobody wakes up saying, I'm going to choose fear today. So what does it look like to choose this new world that you're speaking about?
Right, and you're hitting on something important. A lot of these choices that I'm talking about are unconscious choices. And in a sense, the new world is replacing it with a conscious choice to override those things. You know, really, and again, it's until we do the work, until we become self-aware and really understand our own thinking, we don't realize it, but you are, everyone is effectively driven by 1,000 forms of fear. It's a survival mechanism. It is what our ego imprinting is. It's what our personality is, what our identity is. It's 1,000 forms of fear operating to keep us safe through a whole bunch of different mechanisms. And as a result of that, we're quite easy to be controlled and moved around by fear. So entering the new world is, and I guess there's two parts to it. One, recognizing what are those fears that are controlling me, and then making that decision to face those fears and move into a different place.
And so a part of what you speak when you speak to rigorous honesty is getting rigorously honest with ourselves.
Yes.
about how our interpretation of the world is actually driven by our own perspectives and outlooks.
Yeah, and it's almost, that's why the word rigorous is not just honesty. Honesty is okay. Well, I'm gonna be truthful, generally truthful to people around me. The rigorous honesty is no, I have to apply that to myself. I have to be rigorously honest. Like, am I afraid of doing this thing? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I taking these actions? Have I looked at this thing? Have I understood why it is I'm doing these things? Because if I really do it, I'm going to find out it's probably fear driven, unless I've done something to expose it.
So can we make this, let's make this conversation really real.
Yeah.
Moving from the old world to the new world, whether it's through a friendship, a relationship, or it's through a client, can you describe what that actually looks like in practice?
I'm going to give you a really, we're talking about a big leap in work from go to A to B, but there's these simple steps within it. And here's one that I think people really identify with. I can spend my time looking at my day saying, oh man, I have to drive my kid to school. I have to go to work. I have to mow the lawn. Or I could say, I get to drive my kid to school. I get to go to work and earn a paycheck. I get to mow my lawn. That's a microcosm of the old world to the new world. It's a change of perspective of seeing why we're doing something and how we're relating to it.
Okay, but take it deeper.
Right.
Because we've even spoken on this podcast about that in the past. This feels like it takes that entire conversation to a far deeper level than we've spoken about before. Can you describe your own or what somebody's shift from an old world to a new world looks like on a deeper level than I choose to or I get to?
Yeah. So let's take a look at an example would be going back to what we said in the intro of our conversation with clients and friends are quite pessimistic, the horrid state of the world. That's how they're seeing it. And within that, you're seeing a certain political figure, whatever side you're on, doing a certain thing, and you want to identify it being against that. That person's bad. The person's associating with them are bad. They're evil. I'm going to come up with all sorts of pejoratives to label that. And in the process, I'm going to make myself superior and better. I have the better morals. This is all driven by fear. It's all driven by hate. It's all driven by righteousness. And at the end, it's a scared little child inside us wanting to do that, to protect ourselves from the unknown.
So what would be, in that example, what would be a different way of being able to look at the exact same scenario that you just described, but from a higher consciousness level?
Right.
How could you describe that? I'm putting you on the hot seat a lot.
You are, and I had an answer for it in my mind. It just dropped it for a second. It's always coming back to the seat of empathy to try to understand why people see the world the way they see it, and a recognition that people aren't inherently bad. Everyone inherently wants the same things. They want peace. They want to provide for their family. They want to have happiness in life, and they want to have joy. That's everyone. And instead of vilifying or seeing the world through that lens of us versus them, they're bad, I'm good, seek to understand what is driving their views of behavior. And even find that people who have, maybe even objectively reprehensible behaviors, it's coming from a place of wounding. It's coming from a place of abuse. It's coming from all these other places. And so what I'm already doing by doing it is I'm transporting my consciousness into a place of acceptance, unconditional love, and unconditional forgiveness, to be able to see the world through a different lens. And when I do that, everything will change in my world. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. It does, but I question the word empathy in that, because I'm not sure that it requires empathy. I'm not sure that it requires empathy. What I am sure of is that anytime duality appears, us versus them, good versus bad, we're on the wrong track.
Right.
And I don't necessarily need to feel empathy towards what I might deem from that perspective as bad or evil. What I do need is to question, if I'm in duality, then something's off. Because in truth, as long as there's duality, there's conflict. Is that accurate? So the reason I say that is because in our political scenario, as an example, I think it would be really hard to ask people who are on the far right or the far left to be able to have empathy for one another. But I don't think it would be hard to ask them if they're in duality. And as long as they recognize that they're in duality, then perhaps we might have a conversation.
I think the way, I guess it might be definitional, the way I see that, we're saying the same thing. Because empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and seeing it from their perspective. So in a sense, saying, I'm not separate from, like, I'm going to make myself one with that person by, can I see it from the way they see it? Can I try? Can I not make myself, can I try, instead of making myself separate from them, can I make myself that person? And if I were to see the world from their lens, what would it look like? And that tends to start dissolving duality in my mind.
I just think the word empathy is a big stretch for people when they're caught in that conflict.
Yes. I think, or compassion for sure.
Yeah. So, how do you see this new world versus old world showing up in our lives?
You know, I'll talk about, like, I had this shift back in about 7 years ago, where I was very materialistic in my worldview. I thought I had it all figured out, that the whole purpose was to go out there, make a whole bunch of money, get a whole bunch of possessions, get a whole bunch of title, and from that accumulate a bunch of power. And based on that, I would be happy. That's the shtick. That was the promise. Of course, it went all did that in sort of this old world hyper materialism, and I got to that point, and it wasn't the internal sense of peace or happiness or joy that I was looking for. And so midlife crisis ensues as it happens, and I come out the other side, recognizing that this putting myself in competition with other people, trying to see the world in terms of scarcity, and I had to get more abundance for myself, all those things were taking me in the wrong direction. And if I change my perception and change the way I view the world, that we're all one consciousness, I'm better off cooperating with people if I put myself in service of helping other people get what they want instead of helping me get what I want, then my life suddenly started to become better.
Do you think that when we speak about the word materialism, that we're actually just speaking about acquiring stuff? Or does it go further than that?
I think it goes further than that. I would say consumerism. I should probably say consumerism is more about acquiring stuff. Materialism is more about, and this is a very good question, by the way. I think this is the heart of it. Materialism is believing that the real world is the things we can touch, hear, see, and smell. And that's it. There's nothing more to it. And so a lot of the construct of the old world is just saying that's it, that's the end of it. There's nothing more than that. And the new world is recognizing there's something much greater than that material world. And the material world's part of that spiritual world. But the new world is one that resides at a higher plane of consciousness than just the things we can touch, feel, see, and hear, and taste.
Interesting. So what I hear in that is that the old world was rooted in the five senses. Yeah. And our human capacities. The new world takes us beyond our five senses into something different and far broader. Yes?
Yeah.
Do you want to try and describe that?
I mean, I'll back up and just say, the challenge we have is all the spiritual teachers throughout time have been talking about this exact same thing, that we're being deceived by our senses and what what we're experiencing right now in the material is just Maya. It's not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a manifestation from a much, much higher plane. As we move into the new world, into more higher states of consciousness, which is what we're talking about, old world, new world, all of a sudden the material starts to have less meaning and less matter. So when I go back into my old story about my old version of myself that was very much attached to making money and having all those things, I can't explain why, except none of those things really matter to me. Now, it's nice to have all those things. I don't need to renunciate them, but there's no attachment to them. They really lack and pale in significance compared to the feeling and emotional states that come with higher states of consciousness.
So I'm curious, so many of the spiritual teachings that we've read and learned about do demand, in large part, renunciation of all of those material things. Why do you see it differently?
It's a good question. I guess I've described it as I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary for me, but maybe it's necessary for others. And if you look at the, it's Gurdjieff talks about 4 paths. One of them is renunciation. That's one of the paths. One of them is relationship. That's one of the paths. One of them is the 4th way, which is what I'm talking about, which is, you live both in the material and the spiritual simultaneously. And it's a hard path as you try to balance those things. But it may very likely, like if the Franciscans of St. Francis very much follow, I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but a renunciation model where they just came to believe that, listen, there's no way we can move to this higher state of consciousness where we're attached to our material goods. It just has too much of a pull on it. It feels too real. And as long as I'm anchored by this stuff, I'm never going to get to this place where I want to go to. So I'm going to renunciate as a path.
So I find it interesting because I think I agree with you. I think it'd be really interesting to have a debate with somebody who actually demands renunciation of all material goods. To have that conversation with them.
Yeah, so if you're out there, call in and we'll have you on our show.
Totally. But I think that inevitably there is actually, as you move from the old world into the new world, there is a level of renunciation that happens. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to give up your car, your home, your wealth. But it does mean that you need to be committed to giving up or allowing the aspects of you that are attached to those things to die every single day. Which means that the choice that you were speaking about earlier is a choice that needs to be made every day to not be attached to those things. Doesn't mean I have to give them up, but it does mean that my attachment to them has to die.
And it's not surprisingly, that's it's the unchosen path of people that might wind up in addiction or have some severe event happen in their life where in that process of hitting an addiction bottom, you lose everything that matters anyways. And then in that place, having lost everything and even recognizing that your own self will or materialism as you have it isn't going to get you out of this, and turning to a spiritual solution or turning to God or a higher power for the escape is that they and me have found their way out of that place through accessing that spiritual realm and recognizing all those material goods really didn't matter at the end of the day. And then it's much easier to maintain the lack of attachment to it.
Which is why you often talk about how there's people that always refer that there's people around, probably me included, who wish that they had to struggle with addiction in order to be able to get to that place where they were brought to their knees and didn't have a choice but to renounce or surrender their self-will. But that self-will piece is exactly what we're speaking of.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
So in order to move from the old world to the new world, what actually needs to be surrendered is our self-will.
Yep.
In large part. What does that process of surrendering self-will look like as you watch it in your clients?
Sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, as they say. But again, it's like, it's going back to one of the previous things we talked about. The first of all, you have to recognize what your self-will is. And there's a conscious aspect of your self-will. I'm making a decision right now of the words I'm saying to you. But that's just 5% of, a lot of what our will is. The rest of it's unconscious. The rest of it is this piece that's been molded by our childhood and our growing up in 1,000 forms of fear that then manifests itself in the way we act, the way we talk, the things we do, and even the way we think. It's all driven by this sort of unconscious collective of conditioning and programming. Then becomes this identity that we cling to as our self-will and go off in the world. I'm this, I'm that. These are my beliefs. These are my opinions. This is what I think. And that becomes this identity that we hold on to for dear life because it keeps us safe, because it's all based on fear. It's the letting go of that. That's what we refer to as self-will. It's all of that.
But so then this movement that we're speaking about from one world to another, if I take it further, because as many of you know who have listened to this before, I've definitely had lots of experiences in my life that have brought me to places of reckoning, but never any that have brought me to my knees to the point of, that would connect me with something like an alcoholic bottom. But what I'm hearing is that the identity that needs to be surrendered in order to make this move, it's not just an identity of the dark sides of us. It's also the identity of the things that are bright and shiny.
Sure. Yeah, it's the attachment to all of it.
So it's about the personality that looks good on paper, that might look good publicly, but actually is driven by something of a need to be recognized.
Yeah.
It's the character that looks like they're giving to everyone and everything, and what a beautiful, nurturing presence that is. But actually it's driven because people-pleasing is their way to hide their own feelings of lack of self-worth. And this move, or this piece that we're speaking about, is actually calling on all of us to be able to recognize that as we're pointing fingers at political figures or other people, the reason that it's creating a reaction in us is because it's reflecting to us something inside of ourselves that we're judging in them. That actually, if we turn our fingers back toward us, it's our work to actually begin to shed and recognize so that we can move beyond it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all of that noise out there actually has very little reaction in here because we see the fallacy in it.
That's right. Yeah, and in the big sense you said that, it's like if that part of that identity is I've attached to a certain way of seeing the world, and on a collective basis, if what's happening is an opening and democratization of the information to recognize that maybe that worldview, I need to question that worldview. Maybe it's not what I thought it was. Maybe I've fallen for propaganda, or maybe I didn't have all the information. And as soon as we start questioning that aspect of our belief system, we look at other parts of our belief system and realize, man, I was really clinging to this stuff that doesn't seem to be true. What else have I been clinging to? And the whole thing starts falling apart. And that's why it's like there's this individual aspect that leads us to change, but there's also this collective shift that's happening right now as more and more people, through an increased distribution of information, are recognizing that the identity they created has not served them, or isn't even real. It's illusory.
Okay. I think that's probably a good time for us to pause and take a break.
Sounds great.
Inside the Mind of Hiring with me, Dr. Mickey Feinberg. For hiring managers, HR pros, and job seekers. Tune in to Transformation Talk Radio, the first and third Tuesday at 11, to discover the psychology of making smarter hiring decisions that shape successful teams and organizations. Dr. Mickey and expert guests will disclose the full hiring journey. For more,
tune in to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living, with me, Jacqueline.
And me, Chris, on Transformation Talk Radio, every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and to heal, and how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Witness the field of potential that arises when you take personal responsibility and become the divine creator in your own life.
Visit theway-healing.com for more information.
Are you ready to listen to your soul? Discover the power of pausing and turning in on Our Soul Whisper with Kathy Belmont and Dr. Pat. This sacred show offers a safe space for self-discovery, healing, and soulful transformation. Let your inner voice rise, be heard, and gently guided into expression. Tune in every first and third Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. Subscribe now so you never miss the whisper meant just for you. Visit OurSoulWhisper.com.
What if your training isn't...
Welcome back to Break Free and Trust. So we have a question, and I'm going to read it out for you so that you can answer it, or at least we'll start a conversation around it, from Jessica. Are collective events, wars, crisis, division, co-created at a mass conscious level? And if so, how does one person's inner work actually influence the whole? Small question.
Yeah, I mean, so if I take that 40,000 foot view on spirituality, everything's consciousness. Mm-hmm. You know, that's everything that happens within the material realm is an outcome of our consciousness. You know, mm-hmm. that's the hat tip to quantum mechanics here too. And so all wars, divisions, crises, they are an outcome of mass collective behavior that's driven through mass consciousness. And I mean, I use an example. This may be provocative, but as I was going through my own awakening experience, for lack of a better word, but it is. I'm moving from the material to the spiritual. It's an awakening. It was right at the end of 2019, start of 2020. What was going on right around that? The pandemic. So up until this point in time, I'm a news watcher. I was in the financial markets. I watched the news, reporting facts, and I would use that to make my decisions. I didn't really question it all that much, although I was starting to a little bit. And then the stuff starts coming out with the COVID pandemic. Now, you don't know, listeners may not know this, but I also have I have a graduate degree in statistics. So I'm an expert at analyzing data, and I do it very quickly and very intuitively. And I remember going through this process with COVID. I'm watching the news every day. I'm watching the numbers come out. I'm looking at the website. I'm listening to the people speaking. I'm saying the words they're talking about do not match in any way, shape, or form the data I'm seeing. What the hell is going on? Every single channel I go to, it's the same message, the same words, the same lines, all in tandem, all not matching the actual data that's occurring. And that's just when it really dawned on me. This is not just something that's happened now. This is something that's been happening forever. and will continue to happen forever, is that a lot of the things that we call collective events are narrations and we're guided to it. Our consciousness is taken to this place where it gets to the place where we're having a pandemic and we're having a certain response, or we have whole countries that are frenzied into war and fighting each other, or frenzied into left versus right, or frenzied into all these other ideological divides, because our mass consciousness is being managed through our fear, through our wanting to belong, and through all these things of the new world. We're very, very hackable when we want to belong, we want to fit in, and we're fear. And so the second part of the question, how does one person's inner work actually influence the whole? And this is something we've talked about in terms of consciousness. Higher levels of consciousness, according to the work by David Hawkins, work on a logarithmic or exponential scale. That as we move from a place of fear to love, love has an impact that's 10,000 times the impact of fear. So it doesn't take many people to move into these states of consciousness of unconditional love and joy to have a profound effect on pulling up the rest of the collective around them. So no matter what's going on, if we want to change the world, we want to change things that are happening, the way through is always in, to change our own level of consciousness. That will pull up everyone around us, and that will have the most profound impact. Because as soon as we go out there and start fighting it at the level of fear, at the level of hate, at the level of division, we're just actually adding in energy to the thing we're trying to stop. How would you add to that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you entirely, but I think it's interesting if you look at people throughout history, and the person that's coming up for me right now is the Joan of Arc character, the Jesus character. What you have is somebody who has a tremendous amount of courage, somebody who does not buy into the need to belong on a material plane, somebody who's willing to challenge what shows up on a material plane because they're connected to something on the spiritual plane.
Yeah.
And in that, it takes that person or those people. So the question of, can one person have an influence on others? One person shift in consciousness? Absolutely. But that person, for most of us, looks like the superhero in the room, where everybody is going, you have a room of thousands of people doing Heil Hitler, and there's one person standing there who refuses to do it.
I had that picture in my mind too.
Yeah,
We all know that picture. That's right. Yeah.
But that person is, and I'm going to say it in these words, is superhuman. And what I mean by that is that they're actually no longer buying into the material.
Yeah.
They've transcended it. And they're tapping into something that says the material is no longer big enough to hold what I know to be true.
Yeah.
And I am held by something much bigger than belonging to the material human plane. So I now have the capacity to call a spade and say, hey, wake up. And those that are willing to take the risk to not belong and not conform and not be a part of and not be liked are willing. You know, it's like I'm thinking back to Jesus's work is give up your nets, give up your families, give up your everything that matters to you and follow me. And it doesn't mean, negate your mother and father. It doesn't mean your family shouldn't be important to you. It's give up your attachment to that.
Yes.
And step into something that's much bigger. And that requires something that most human beings who are walking on this plane are unaware of because they've never had to awaken to.
Yeah, and that's it. If you haven't touched it or haven't felt it, it doesn't really exist, right? And so this is why these spiritual states of consciousness dog. They can be very extremely elusive. You haven't experienced it. And I was like that. I would have 10 years ago, I just would have scoffed at this type of conversation of like people who talked about different states of consciousness. Oh, they're just people that can't hack it in the real world, like me, right? And I put myself in this place of superiority. And now that I've had, these different life experiences and realized different states of consciousness, I'm fully open to like, how high does it go? Like, I hear people talk that sound like they're enlightened. And I really want to listen to them because I have something to learn from. I'm humbled by them. But I think that Jesus example is a great one because I sort of chuckle in my mind thinking, what would our mainstream media say about Jesus right now? Because at his heart, he was a revolutionary. He was counterculture. He went against the system. It would have destroyed him.
They would have absolutely destroyed him, but they would have destroyed him in the same way that they burned the witches at the stake.
That's right. Yeah.
Everybody who challenges the status quo is dangerous.
Yeah.
We saw that in COVID when, there's one line of conversation and dialogue going on, and then anybody who questioned it was canceled.
Yeah.
Licenses were taken away. There wasn't the possibility for conversation. Mm-hmm. There was only the possibility for good and bad, right and wrong. People who had, were triple board certified doctors were left to be laughed at. Not nobody, there's some of us that stopped, but nobody stopped to question, wait a minute, maybe the way that we're looking at this is off base.
I mean, that's I think we identified at the state of consciousness of the new world is that of truth with a capital T, and there's only one truth. And I think, we're alluding to as soon as you see the censorship machine come in, or the silencing, or the canceling, it's probably an indication that it's not the side of truth.
Well, it's interesting though too, the idea that we're talking about a new world. It's not new. This is not something that's brand new. This is something that's repeated itself over and over and over again in history. And at one point, it looks like the crucifix. At another point, it looks like burning people at the stake.
Yeah.
Today, it looks like cancel culture.
Yeah.
They're all the same, but we keep coming back to the same place of, wait a minute, is there not more than just this duality?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the new world is that it's of unity and oneness. Yeah. It's that we're all one consciousness, and the similarities between all of us are so much more profound and interesting than any differences. Can we just let all those go?
So that all sounds, like unicorn and rainbows. Why don't we all want to step through that door?
Well, I'm gonna throw this back to you
now. What do you mean?
Because you're, one of the other reasons we wanted to talk about this in this podcast was the blog, but it's also sort of what some of the experiences you're having right now in your own work and your own, and your own coming into consciousness.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. So it's not all unicorns and rainbows.
No,
what have you been going through
for
the last 2 years?
It's not. I don't think it's the last 2 years. I think it's the last 5 years. Yeah. Since I met you.
That's right. Yeah. My bottom was hard and easy, but you had to do the hard work here.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that this work, we see this work often with people who have reached their bottoms. And it makes sense that there needs to be a level of surrender in that place because there's nothing left. Right? So either I surrender my self-will to something greater than myself, or I die or rot in a jail cell, or end up in the hospital or whatever. I think it's very different work when it hits us at a time where none of that's happening. And what I would say for me is, I almost have the opposite experience, which is all of this shift or this awareness is happening for me at a time where my life is better than it's ever been. And if I stop and I look back, I would say that there have been many moments in my life where I've sort of hit the height of something. And for me, I'll speak about career as an example. Each time I hit the highest point, in something I was doing, there was a still quiet voice that said, "You're done. No more. Time to go." And I think it's that same voice that's ushering me into this new place, which is, it's not about the height of heights. It's not about being great at something. It's not about doing good or being in service. While that's a part of it, it's about recognizing what's driving you in those places and actually stopping entirely and recognizing the chaos that exists when what you're doing is no longer there, because what you're left with is who you are. And for me, what I've learned is that who I am without the doing is actually all of the fears that led me into the doing in the first place. Does that make sense?
Say that again. One time.
Each time I stopped doing something that I was successful at, that I was impacting people at, it would be insanity from the outside world for me to walk away from. But something was drawing me out of it. And what was drawing me out of it, I think now, was God. And it was not that, not that, not that. And what it was not that wasn't, don't do good work for other people. It was, recognize what's behind the work that
why
you're doing.
are you doing the quote good work for other people?
And what it's forced me to do is recognize, oh, there's a people-pleasing piece. Oh, there's a worthiness piece. Oh, there's a being a good girl piece. Oh, there's all of these unconscious drivers that were completely beyond my awareness, that the only way that I was able to recognize were present was by stopping. And what's happening for me now is this place of all of those signposts, guideposts, they're gone. And it's not a fun place to be. It's a rich place to be. It's a rich place to be because there's so much possibility. But the possibility for me now looks beyond my small self into my big self. And that big self looks like not myself at all, actually. It looks like union with divine consciousness. So it stops looking like, okay, Jack, what do you need to be doing now in order to be of value, feel of value, demonstrate your value? But actually, okay, for me, the word's God. For you, the word might be something different. What's your will for me? And as I ask those questions, sometimes it's to do things that are incredibly uncomfortable. And actually, I would say on a big level, they feel crucifying because they crucify my old self. And I find that something like that happens for me every single day. So why would we choose that? I'm not sure that we choose that, actually. I think it's chosen for us. And for me now, there is no other choice. That is my choice. And it's a choice that's left me confused. It's a choice that leaves me uncomfortable. It's a choice that, it's interesting. I had a conversation the other night with a group of friends, and one of the comments to me was, oh, well, when you're in that place, one choice is plant medicine. You can find your way through with plant medicine. And this one part of me was like, oh yeah, like maybe I can open that door and then I can be done with this work and just move into a place of absolute peace. And then there was a deeper voice inside of me that went the same way, not that. it was very clear. Well, it's not that for me. No, this is a place of struggle, because the struggle is necessary in order for me to completely surrender.
Yeah, and you used the crucifixion and the cross, and it's such a powerful metaphysical allegory, because it's a limit story of pain and being innocent and enduring all the stuff to get to this other place. And again, in my place, I didn't choose it. It was sort of like, as I said in my thing, God clapped, and there it was. And it was, my character got eviscerated, and I went into this work out of desperation, but it happened. Jesus in the allegory willingly chooses to go through this, to show us this is the way, follow me. Why do you choose it?
Because intuitively I know that there's more than what I have experienced up until this point. And intuitively I know that it's not about more stuff or more things or more people or different people. It's about my relationship with myself and my relationship with God. But there's something really interesting that you just spoke, and I'm going to come back to in terms of the crucifixion, which drives us back to the second part of the question that was asked in terms of the political world, which is actually what we're doing on the outside by communing with duality. And by living in this place of duality, of good versus bad, right versus wrong, blame, oppressor versus victim, it's like watching a game of ping pong. And the ping pong that we're doing is we're crucifying each other.
Yeah.
And in that process, as long as I'm crucifying you, then I don't actually have to face that it's me that also needs to be crucified in order to find freedom. And I don't mean crucified, literally crucified,
yeah.
But the whole purpose, in my mind's eye, and this is my interpretation of the crucifixion, isn't to crucify another. It's to recognize that everything that I believe, everything that I am attached to, I need to be able to bring into question. I need to allow to die in order for me to be free. And it's so much easier to point a finger than it is to actually look at ourselves in the mirror. And I think that what's happening politically is designed perfectly to wake us up to our own shadows. But we're too arrogant and oftentimes too stupid to be willing to look in the mirror. Yeah. And so we're killing each other.
And I think that's, like I said, part of why I believe the timeline's accelerating, because that polarization seems to be speeding up.
It's profound.
And if we stay with this idea of duality, non-duality, if we're all one consciousness, which is the non-dual world, the new world unity, whatever we're doing to another, we're actually unwittingly doing to ourselves. The other person is you, but we don't recognize it. So the more anger, hate, spite we throw at another person, actually we're just doing it to ourselves. It's like our left hand hates our right hand, so they get into a fight with each other.
Yeah.
And that's where all of this, the spiritual teachings about judge not, love your enemy, pray for your enemies. Like all of these things are pointing out to you that you're all one consciousness. And everything you do to try to, all the ego wants to do, it's this mechanism that says, okay, we're one consciousness. Well, I'm going to separate you and make you special. But in doing so, we're being pulled more and more away from our true nature. And we're going more and more into depression, into all of these things.
There was a second part of this question that we didn't speak to, which is around social media. And I'd love to bring it forward, even just to end our conversation for today, which is, do we need to break? Is one way through this to take a break from social media? I actually think it's really important that we step away from the noise that's going on in the outside world, because what we're left with when we do that is the noise that's going on in the inside world. And that's the noise that's actually drawing and needing our attention. The other is a distraction, and it's designed to be a distraction, because as long as I'm not doing my own work and I'm focused on you and what you're doing or not doing, I'm not tapping into a power that is accessible to me that can transform lives. I'm caught up in the noise, and it's my noise, not the noise out there, but it's my noise that is a necessary noise to be looked at, examined, and cleared. And everything that's happening in the social media world is distracting me from having to do that work.
I would massively expand it from social media to the news.
Yeah.
Like I was like,
To me, that is.
Yeah, social media. No, but it's like learning about events and politics and media and news. It's like, as we talked about here, recognizing it, it's old world stuff that's meant to happen to our limbic systems and manipulate us out of fear. And unless we've done our work, our own filters are just going to see what we want to see within that. And
we'll very easily be hooked. And the whole intention in that work is to hook us so that we are caught up in this dualistic way of thinking rather than moving into a higher consciousness.
And the one I'll close with this, because this is what was suggested for me, and I did it, is that when I got to that state where I needed to change my life, I took a break from all of it. I logged off all my social media accounts. I stopped watching the news. I stopped reading the paper. And in fact, I stopped listening to the music I used to listen to, and I listened to only spiritual music, and I read only spiritual books. And that's all I did for a relatively long period of time. And a big shift happened within me. And then I reintroduced selectively news sites and other information sites back into my life, but slowly over a period of time. And I could see them in a much different light. But I really suggest a period of abstinence as a starting point if you're really serious about this work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So we will see you in a couple weeks.
You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living.
Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal. How to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine, you will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.